You've been on practically every intro that's like we've really
You gotta know where we really are, and so we're gonna start that process here.
Bloodlust in a holy war. Listen up, hear the patriots shout. Times are changing. In the end, my choice was clear. Take a shot in the face of fear. Fist up in the firing line. Times are changing. See a dying star, white lies, it's a man on fire, making love with the devil hurts. Times are changing. A thin line, the whole truth, the far right, the left view, breaking all those promises made. Times are changing.
Business is the psychology and skills, period. That's it. We change those two things. Skills too. Marketing skills, financial intelligence, recruiting, training, all those things. We train those too. Don't get me wrong, we got to do the skills also. But I could give you every skill. How many of you have learned from this before that was invaluable from some source, a mentor, a coach, an event, a university, I don't know what. And you were excited about it, and then you never actually followed through. Who's done this before? Say, I. Listen, knowledge is not power. Execution trumps knowledge every day of the week. My goal is to make you execute. I can't make you, but I can get you where you tap into that part of yourself. And that shift is the most important shift of these few days.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tonight it's our 9 p.m. Gladiator 7 and 7 primer session. For those of you that are gladiators that are actually in our gladiator group, welcome to tonight's sessions. We are on cycle 7, force number 4, sales mastery. For those of you that have absolutely no idea what I just said, welcome to tonight's session. We have opened up tonight's group. If you are a business owner, you're a business manager, you're in the sales department, so you sell things for a living, you're going to want to catch this video. Tonight we've got a special guest. We brought in some more big guns, and we're going to continue to bring in big guns all this cycle for you. But tonight is absolutely no exception. For those of you that are not part of our Gladiator groups, what tonight's about, my name is Stephen Tuig. I am Tony Robbins' senior business strategist. And part of my role is to enroll people into a program called Business Mastery. For those of you that don't know, Business Mastery is Tony's $1 million business consultation, but done in a group setting so we can offset the cost. And basically what he does is he takes your business and strips it all down and goes through it piece by piece with a fine-tooth comb, looking at what's working and what's not. Well, then he shows you exactly how he runs business. Imagine what it would be like if you had $1 billion player teaching you how he runs his businesses. We're talking 33 businesses, 6 billion annual revenue, 12 of them he actively manages right now. I know of at least one business that he's recently sold for about 250 million. So he is a $1 billion player. If you could get in a room with him, what would you ask him? Well, what he would tell you is, to be successful in business, you've got to have a framework. It's much like with anything else. A business is a system for providing massive value to a select client target. If you don't have a system, you don't have a business. Well, in business, we start to look in the mechanics. There's a lot of different pieces inside the mechanics of a business to actually make those a much larger system. But then how do you, as the business owner, the business manager, somebody in a leadership position, how do you then manage those smaller pieces without becoming overwhelmed or drug into the day-to-day? Well, if you have a framework, and Tony's framework is the 7 forces of business mastery, well, then you won't get sucked into the day-to-day, because you've got the ability to rise above and look at key variables that allow you the ability to anticipate the road ahead. And that's really the key. Well, what we do in the Business Mastery Gladiator group is every week at Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, we get on here for our gladiators. And I see them on right now. So if you're a gladiator, if you could check in for us with your gladiator name so that we know that you're there, it allows us the ability to prime for our week. If you're a business leader, you know that Monday's the beginning of what could be a very great week or a very bad week. And many times we find it's 80% psychology, 20% mechanics. So we prime here on Monday night. That's what gladiators do, is they prepare for the battle. So every week we cover a force. The first force of business mastery is to have what we call an effective business map. If you don't know where you're at, you don't know where you're going, and you can't understand the terrain you're operating in, there's absolutely no way that you can anticipate. There's no way that you can project. There's no way you can create what I call functional strategy. Once you can understand the terrain that you're operating in, the second step is to understand where you need to be on the map. We call that constant strategic innovation. How are you adding what we would define as massive value for your clients? Once you've identified where you need to be on the map, the third question you have to ask yourself is, how are you going to communicate that value add effectively? That's what we call world-class marketing. In today's world, you can't just be advertising. There's a lot of people out there that come to me, and when I dig in with them as clients and I really find out what they're doing, I find out the reason why they're not selling is because they're in Russia and they're speaking Japanese, and their ideal client is in France and they're speaking German, and I think I know why nobody's buying from you. You've got to be able to communicate in a way that your client can understand and digest. We teach real-time marketing. We teach newsjacking. We teach a lot, 4, 5, 6 different strategies that you can inject into your business, and many of them you can create millions of dollars worth of marketing and not pay a dime. Well, then after we've communicated effectively, the next question that we normally go to on a week-by-week basis is, well, then how are you converting those clients? And last, if you guys were on Friday's session with us when we were interviewing Gene McNaughton, Gene turned me on to a book called The Challenger Sale. And if you haven't read it yet, you need to pick it up. I started reading it when he told us about the book, because he's my mentor, and I picked up the book and I started reading it, and I haven't been able to put it down. Well, typically when we get to week number 4, I start talking about the sale. Well, I found some very interesting information that I wanted to share with you guys. It goes above and beyond bringing the revenue in. The sales process itself is an important piece. When Tony breaks down sales mastery, he breaks it down into what I would consider 3 pieces. First, you have to ask yourself, who are you? Who do you have? What butt do you have in the seat? Tony talks about 3 different questions that you need to ask yourself to make sure that you have the right salesperson in place. You cannot. They've got to be made for their position. We would suggest to you that their DNA has to match the position. It has to enhance the position. Well, now that we've got the right person, then we have to ask ourselves, how do we motivate that person? How do we drive that person to excel and do what I call pushing past the pain? Because if you don't have the right person in the seat and you don't have them motivated correctly, there's no way they're going to provide that wow type of impact that you need to be successful and to be a world-class brand in today's world. The third piece is you have to have a journey. You have to have a process. You have to have something that you can put some metrics in place so that you can make sure that everybody's on their A game, whether you're there or not, so that you know what your customer's journey is as you continue to exit yourself from the revenue generating cycle. Well, it's more than that. In this book, the Challenger Cell, they went in and they interviewed well over 5,000 different companies. Now, full disclosure, this is a B2B interaction that they were interviewing. These were all B2B transactions, and they went in and they were reviewing customer loyalty. They wanted to know, what did it take? What were the main pillars in regards to customer loyalty? And what they found out was, first off, only 9% of the people that were interviewed would suggest that price was a reason to be a loyal customer. Now, you go to your sales team and ask your sales team. It's always interesting to me when you go to your sales team and you ask them, what's the number one objection? They always come to you with price. Well, if you think about it, when you think of price, what do you think of? Do you think of loyalty? Do you think of high quality? Like, what are the labels when you think of cheap, when you think of inexpensive? What are the labels? Put some labels down in the comment section. What are some of the labels that you think of when you think of the word when it's just about the lowest price, either cheap or inexpensive? What are the labels that you would make up for a brand like that? Because when they went in and interviewed them, what they found out, it was less value. And for you to be successful and to have high customer loyalty and be the lowest priced product in the playing field, you've got to have a very high value add. It's almost like your price will lower the expectation of how valuable you are just by a lower price. Well, if you're going to just aim for a customer that's just buying from you from price, how likely do you think you'll be able to be a higher priced product later on down the road? And you're not. It's just not going to happen. That customer that's coming, just the 9% customers, those customers are just coming to you, that are just coming to you for price, aren't ever going to be anything for price. They're not ever going to be loyal to your brand. They're always going to be loyal to the price. And you have to ask yourself, do you want that customer? And so then we move on to the second type of customer. 38% of the customers interviewed would tell you that the reason why they were loyal to a brand was because the brand either the brand outperformed, the product outperformed, or the service outperformed. That was 38% of customers that were interviewed said that's why they're loyal to companies that they do business with, to their vendors. A whopping 53%. It had nothing to do with price. It had nothing to do with whether the brand, the product, or the service outperformed. 53% of the people that were interviewed in this, again, it's called the Challenger Sale. 53% that were interviewed would tell you that it was the sales experience itself. And the authors said they were painfully and brutally honest in regards to this specific aspect. And they went on to tell horror story after horror story after. I mean, imagine when you and look at your customer base. Go in and look at your customers that are loyal to you, and ask yourself, which one of these three do you think is the biggest indicator? And then you might even, as an exercise, guys, you might even go ask some of your clients why they buy, not just from you, just from in general. Talk to people and ask them, how important is that sales experience? And go back and think about all the times you've bought stuff recently. How much of the sales experience itself did it play into your buying a specific vehicle? Because I would be willing to bet, and I agree with these numbers, how high the sales experience is from a loyalty standpoint. So it's not just the revenue coming in the door. The sales experience itself will allow you the ability to sink in and really own that client and create what we're later on down the road. The seventh force of business mastery is to create what we call a raving fan client. If you don't create a sales experience from this client right from here, you're 53% behind the 8 ball before you've even started if you don't go here. So tonight, what we've done is we've brought a special guest, an expert in regards to the fourth force of business mastery. But before I go there, I want to introduce to you my co-facilitator, because tonight I'm going to be riding with y'all in the back seat, or in the high view, and we're going to bring on my co-facilitator tonight. My co-facilitator really knows. Lynne, are you there? You're there. So
I'm here. Yes.
Lynne Hampton is an attorney, an entrepreneur. She's a graduate of the Business Mastery Program. She does not, so that you're clear, everybody, she does not work for Tony. She does this because our clients are raving fans, and she is a raving fan. She needs no introduction. Lynne, how are you today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much. I always look forward to Mondays. How about you?
Monday's got to be, people always, they wait for Friday. They can't wait for Saturday. I'm telling you, when I get on this call session with you and work with this group of business owners,
yeah,
it's got to be the highlight of my week. And tonight, I'm even more excited because we're bringing back a heavy hitter in her own right. So I'm going to go ahead and disappear so that you guys can have the floor. You have the comm.
I've got the comm, and before we go into our speaker, I'm going to go into the next video, guys. So stay tuned for this and enjoy.
I'm only talking to the people that are ready to get to the next level of their life and their career. And they're going to boldly walk into the next season of their life, unapologetically getting rid of all things, people, and situations that no longer belong in their life. Most of you, you're so consumed with everything that's going on in the world. This is the reasons you haven't figured out your own life yet. Every blog, every website, every tweet, every Instagram post, you are so consumed with everything that's going on in the world, you're ignoring your own world. You can never shine trying to sit on someone else's sun. You can never figure out who you are if you're consumed in everything that everybody else is and what they're doing and the moves that they're making. Because you're trying to chase someone else's life. You're trying to chase someone else's lifestyle and identity, all while ignoring your own life and your own path. What is the vision for your life? What are the ideas and the dreams for your life? What are you supposed to be doing? Who are you? What are your gifts and talents? What is your ultimate destiny and your goals? And you should understand this, that it was always going to be your family and your friends that would be the first ones to try and talk you out of your vision and your big idea. That's why you're supposed to live your life. Focus on your intentions and do your thing. Did you allow your self-worth to be based on what other people think of you is the beginning of the end. I believe in me. If you stop believing in me, I'm not gonna believe in myself any less. If you believe that I'm irrelevant, that no one is checking for me, and that I don't mean anything to the world, because you think or believe that about me, it doesn't mean that I'm gonna believe it about myself. See, the day that you start living your life according to everybody else's opinion is the beginning of the end. Most of you guys don't actually know your self-worth. You don't know your self-value. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself, independent of the validation of the world. Have opinions and feelings about yourself, independent of the feedback. I really think that if you get rid of the trash in your life. That can be people, business, and situations. You too could really, I really believe that you can reach your full potential. I want you to fly. I want you and your career and your financial blessings to bypass me.
So welcome everybody tonight. We have, as Stephen said, a very, very special presentation for you. I just wanted to mention a little bit about the video that we've chosen. And, you know, it encourages you, this video encourages you to focus on your own journey and to overcome obstacles, to forget the naysayers, and just continue to pursue the visions and the dreams that you have so that you can reach your own potential and achieve your dreams. So tonight, we're going to turn that focus instead to your customer's journey. Remember, they have some of the same dreams and aspirations as you. They have their own. They may be even bigger than yours. So the question is, how can you help them reach their potential and their dreams? How can you help them fly? You may have seen the list of awards and honors that have been presented to our speaker tonight. They've been presented to her by organizations around the world. And some of them include the top 5 women customer experience influencers, top 100 customer success strategists, top 15 women customer experience influencers you must follow, top 5 customer experience gurus, 10 biggest influencers in customer experience around the world, number 1 of the top 30 influencers in customer marketing, top customer success resources, number 3 of the top 75 customer experience blogs and websites for businesses, among many others. Tonight, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome one of the top customer experience experts in the world. She is presenting Force 4 for us with Sales Mastery. Annette is the founder and CEO of her own boutique company, CX Journey Inc. There, she consults with companies around the world in the customer, employee experience, and specifically for us tonight, mapping the journeys of your customers and employees. We have several new members in our group this year. We're in our 3rd year, and we had a whole bunch of new people joining us after Business Mastery in January. So for those of you who may not be as certain on how to start a customer journey map or to track the customer experience, we have the perfect person to do that for you tonight. Her name is Annette Franz. And Annette, if you want to hit your webcam and join us, Steve, I'm going to have to ask you if you can enlarge her because I don't see those controls. So sorry. See, you can't go away, Steve, but we need you.
They're in the upper right-hand corner. If you place your mouse in the upper right-hand corner of the picture, your picture,
okay,
you'll see in the upper corner, you'll see the little minimize, maximize button. All right,
yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. So Annette, what we've been doing this cycle in particular is asking all of our presenters what their
embarrassing questions.
Well, that might be one of them. So you happen to be on when I got to share my biggest failure. So I'm going to ask you about yours and then your track to where you are right now, if you don't mind sharing.
Wow. I have absolutely no prep at this at all. So I really have to. Well, you know, this takes you way back. This takes you way, way back. And it doesn't even have anything to do with anything that I'm doing today. And it's funny because I was just telling somebody about this the other night. I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and my dream from the moment I could touch animals, and that video that you just showed was just to me, I was like, oh my God, I want one of each of those. But my dream growing up on a farm was to become a veterinarian. I love animals. But once I started going to, I was going to Ohio State and I was studying animal science, and when I found out that I needed 6 quarters of chemistry, which is like my kryptonite.
Okay.
that pretty much put that to an end. And, it still kills me today because I absolutely love animals. So, but that was, but because that happened. And so let's take a positive spin on it, right? Because
that's where we were going to go next. Absolutely.
Exactly. I took a whole different journey in my life, and that's why I'm here today with you. So
I'm so happy that you are, and so is everybody in our group. And this is your second time coming back for us to present. So we are really, really grateful and honored that you took time out of your Monday to spend it with us. So
well, thank you for having me back too. I'm honored to be back again. And when you're reading through that list of honor and recognition, I'm so humbled by all of that. And I was probably like 30 shades of red too. So thank you for that.
Well, and I didn't even go through them all. We'd have been here all night. So I went on your LinkedIn page and I'm like, holy crap. So, and just like exactly Stephen's response. And he was, he was quick and he got that out there. It's like, gosh, you are the expert in so many areas in your business. I mean, I was exploring your website and Gladiators, if you want to see a world-class website and blog and everything that she does there, go. We'll post the link again and just go look and see what she's got. She's not charging for any of this. This is where she's giving even more value. And look how it's coming back and visiting her now. So just wanted to ask a couple of questions besides the failure one, which I appreciate your being honest with that. I also grew up on a farm in Kentucky, so we were almost neighbors at some point.
Yes, we were.
I was happy to get away from the farm life.
And I always say I would never have traded growing up differently, for the world. I mean, it was just such a great upbringing, and you see so many things that there's so many people in this world never even see as an adult. So yeah, I'm pretty honored to have done that.
I agree with that part too, but I was also happy it was such a small town and it's like, okay, I've got to, spread my wings a little bit and see what's out there in this world. So
well, listen, I live in Orange County, California, so it is night and day. So
totally. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you, and then you can start, jump into your presentation, is we've talked a lot this cycle about bringing humanity back into the businesses, and we can't focus on price. We can't, because that's not what's going to create the customer loyalty. And you've stressed this many times in your blog posts and throughout your talks and stuff like that. Can you talk about what's created that shift and why we're now more focused on that?
Oh gosh, it's so funny because there's, I don't want to pick on United Airlines, but there's so many examples out there of how poorly we treat customers. And, that's, the whole experience is what, Stephen brought up some great statistics earlier. It's about I'll even just step back for a second and say, when we, and even when I start talking about journey mapping, when we start to design the experience for our customers, we have to think about how that impacts our customers day in and day out. And here's what ends up happening. And this is what happens, like, again, I won't pick on like United or anybody else, but these kinds of experiences happen when we decide to design an experience for customers because we feel like we know what's best. And we being, people inside the business, and we call that inside out thinking, right? We design an experience thinking we know what's best for our customers and what our customers want. And that's just not the case. We're all very different. And so if we don't do the research and the go through these processes like I'm going to be talking about today, we will never really understand our customers. And it's all about understanding customers. And I'm just going to say right now that anything that I talk about today about customers applies 110% to employees as well. It's both sides of the equation there. And you can use journey mapping for employees as well. But that's another experience that needs to be a humane one, right? We send our children to work every day, and they come home and they are in worse shape than they were when they left this morning because they had a crappy day at work. Their managers treated them like crap. There was no humanity in the workday, right? Employees have become sort of the cogs in the wheel of success for businesses. And so we need to, and the same for customers. Customers have become sort of the cogs in the wheel of success for businesses as well, because they're all about the money and the money and the money and the shareholder value. And we've got to get over the old time thinking of maximizing shareholder value and really focusing on, the new thinking, which is all about creating and nurturing customers. So. I hope that answered your question, but there's so many examples of terrible experiences where we don't treat each other humanely. I always say when I'm talking about this in presentations too, is like, what happens to us as employees and as business people when we cross that threshold into our offices, that we suddenly lose our ability to think about ourselves and what we're designing as something that's for people, for people just like us. Humanity goes out the doors when we walk in our offices. So we have to remember that.
Yeah, it truly is. So that's part of the shifting leadership paradigm that I saw in one of your posts.
Yes.
So how can leadership shift that? So not only will their employees trust them more, but also their buyers and customers.
Well, they need to first and foremost, they need to make a choice. They need to choose to do things differently, right? And if they can't make that choice, then it's just not going to happen, So that's the key, really, is it's within us to make that choice to do things differently.
Right. I also saw, maybe you said this the first time that you were on with us. It's and I saw also one of your blog posts about keeping your employees engaged. If you don't do that and they leave you, there's a cost. But what if you do that and they leave you? I loved your response to that.
And you know what? I don't even remember what my response was at this point.
Well, your response was, well, what if you, I guess maybe I put this backwards, but yes. What if you don't do that for them? Right. So
yeah. And it's about, there's a famous sort of little story out there about a CEO and a CFO talking about, the expense of employee training and why should we put out this money and the time and the effort when employees are just going to leave us. And the flip side of that was, well, if we don't do it and they stay, then what, and then we've got employees who are here, who haven't been trained, who aren't engaged, and all of that. So yeah, I love that story.
Yeah. And then Stephen always talks about in a lot of our sessions, an indifferent employee creates indifferent results. So
absolutely. No, that's a great point.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all the questions I have right now. So if you want to get started with your slide presentation, if I have more, we'll pop in. And as we go along, if Stephen has some from our viewers, he will also pop in and let you know. So
okay, I would love to.
And by the way,
I'm sorry. Say that again a little bit louder, Stephen.
Excuse me, ladies. This is Gar.
Y'all are doing amazing, by the way.
Thank you. Well, it's going to get even better, and I'm going to minimize and let her take over here.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. And I just want to say that, the presentation that I'm doing today is a little bit different from the one that I did. It's probably been about 6 months or so, maybe even longer since I was presenting to the group the first time. But this is a little bit of a different presentation. The first time around, my focus was really on the details of how do you map, like really nitty-gritty details, step by step on how to map your customers' journeys. And this time I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about how to map, but I'm also going to talk about the fact that journey mapping isn't just a tool, it's a process. And if you don't do anything with that tool, that map you've created, then it's really all for naught. So let me go ahead and get started on my presentation. I'm going to pop up the slide deck here and start going through that. And then you won't have to watch me as the sun goes down in my, and all of a sudden, like this video turns to black because you can't see me anymore. All right, so I'm going to skip through these first couple of slides here if I can do that. Oh, there we go. Let's get through that. Okay, so let me just start with a quick sort of overview on what is journey mapping in case you're new to this whole concept. It's really a creative process that we use to understand, well, first of all, to walk in our customers' shoes and really understand how they interact with our brand, right? What are those sort of detailed step-by-step steps that they take when they go to do some interaction with the brand? And that interaction might be a purchase, it might be calling support, it might be researching a product on the website, just some examples of the types of things that we might map. And really what ends up happening when we lay out this map is we're really capturing a timeline of that journey, right? Of what the customer is doing and thinking and feeling throughout that interaction. And we'll get into some more of those details in just a bit. It really tells the customer story and it helps to build empathy, to Lynne's point about humanity and really sort of shifting the thinking on the customer experience and the employee experience and bringing humanity back. And what journey maps help to do is to sort of build that empathy. And empathy is a big catchword right now or buzzword in the customer experience world, but it's so important, and we'll talk about that a little bit too as we go through this presentation. Journey maps help us to figure out where there are gaps or needs for improvement along the customer journey, and then finally, they're not just all about like understanding and discovering; they're also about helping us co-create the the perfect experience for our customers along with them. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But we map because I like to say you can't transform something you don't understand, and we map so that we can understand. We map so we can understand our customers, and we map so that we can understand their current experience, so that we can design the experience of tomorrow. You really can't design what we call a future state experience if you don't know what the current state is, right? You have to understand what the current state is to know what's going right and what's going wrong, so you can keep doing the things that are going well, but stop doing the things and change the things that are not going so well. So I've already alluded to a little bit of this, but maps in a nutshell are used in a bunch of different ways. Number one, to understand experiences. Like I said, they're used to design new experiences to help you prioritize and really rethink the processes that we're putting, or the steps that we're putting our customers through today, and creating new ones. They become the blueprint for that new design. So as we go and implement the new design, it becomes a blueprint for that new or future state experience. And then we also use the journey maps to communicate experiences. I always tell my clients that once you've created that journey map, you can then use that journey map to onboard new employees so that they get a really good sense of the customer-centric culture they've just joined, for training and ongoing education, and to teach employees about the experience and the experience they're expected to deliver. And then finally, the maps are also used to align the organization around the customer. I've used the journey maps to get commitment from executives for some of these customer experience strategies and initiatives around that strategy, and to really give the whole organization a clear line of sight to the customer and how and where they impact the customer. Like a lot of employees, back office employees don't think they impact the customer and the customer experience, but they do. And with the journey map, we can show them how they have an impact on the experience. So let me take you through some of the fundamental principles of mapping before I get into the 6 steps, what I call the 6 steps from mapping to outcomes. So let's start with a few rules of the road about journey maps, just real general, high level sort of things you have to know about journey maps. When you map the customer journey, it's the beginning, not the end, right? And by that, I mean that it's a tool. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's a tool. That is part of a process, part of a larger process. So just because you mapped doesn't mean you're done yet, right? It's just the beginning. There's a lot of work that lies ahead. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move along here. Journey maps have to be a part of your overall customer experience strategy. They can't be standalone sort of efforts throughout the organization. They really have to be part of the overall customer experience strategy, and they have to be governed by the same governance structure that is governing your customer experience strategy as well. They have to be collaborative and collaborated. So you can't just, Lynne, you can't just sit at your desk and decide you're going to map the journey to purchase something from Amazon, right? You have to get all of the right people into the room and map with them. So it's a very collaborative process. And that's why we often say that you can use journey maps to break down organizational silos, because it does bring people together from different, cross-functional areas of the organization to really understand, again, the impact on the customer, and then also allows them to share information, share data, and those kinds of things so that we can get a single view of the customer. They have to be shared and socialized. So like I was just saying, they have to be, employees won't know what the experience is that they need to deliver if they haven't seen what that experience looks like. So it's, again, they have to just, you've got to put them out there so that people can see what the new experience is going to be and what they're expected to deliver. They have to be updated. They're not a one and done kind of a tool. Once you've created the map and once you've made improvements, you've got to come back, and the map must always have like the most current state of the experience in the map today. So, and they need to be validated. So if you have started to map with an internal team, with an internal group, and haven't yet brought customers in to map with you, then you need to go out and validate the map with the customer. The alternative to that is that you start mapping with customers in the room. The maps always have to be from the customer, created from the customer's viewpoint. So that's why we say go out and validate. If it's something that you've done or started internally, call some customers, talk to some customers, share it with them so that they can say, yeah, you've pretty much got it, or no, I've got 5 other steps that you've missed, kind of thing. So, and I know a lot of folks in this group too are small business owners, and maybe that seems cumbersome, but I think it's probably the smartest thing you can do, because again, this is all about understanding your customers and making sure you get this right so that you can fix the experience going forward. And then finally, journey maps are not just for customers, they're for any of your constituents, right? Anybody who you do business with, your vendors, your employees, if they're licensees or franchisees, whoever it is, you can map their experience as well and make sure that every interaction with your brand is a great one. A couple of things in terms of when you are in the actual workshops themselves, and I'm going to tell you about how you're going to map here in just a second, but just sort of a rules of the road when you actually get into the workshop is following. Number one, listen. Journey mapping is all about listening to your customers and letting them do the talking. And again, I would recommend that if you have the opportunity to create these maps, that you do so with your customers and don't just sit in a room with internal folks. I've done it. I've done mapping and mapping workshops with my clients both ways. And I got to tell you, the ones that are the most fun and the most educational are the ones when we map with our customers, right? And it gives you the ability to just ask pointed questions, and say, well, why do you do that step? And customers have the ability to ask you questions too. Why do you make us do that step? Kind of things. So my recommendation is to definitely map with your customers. So listening is key, and just be open to hearing what they have to say. Now you've popped in my screen, Lynn, so I'm guessing you have a question for me.
I just wanted to expand a little bit on
Sure.
bringing your customers in. Are they like excited to get to be a part of your process? I mean, how do you engage them to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So, Stephen had mentioned earlier, he was giving some stats on B2B business. It may be a lot easier to do it in a room with B2B customers because you can go account by account by account if you want, or you have the ability to just bring folks in who don't have a problem being in a room with their competitors or anything like that, right? So, but it is very educational. For B2C, especially if it's a large market, there are online tools that you can use, online platforms, I should say, that you can use, where you can do focus groups and online communities where you can send, as part of your journey mapping exercise, you can send them on missions and send them out and give them questions. So they've signed up to do this. They've got an app on their phone. They can take pictures. They can upload pictures. They can answer questions about the journey. They can take notes about, I just went to Target and I made this purchase. Here are the steps that I went through and where the pain points were and where things went well, those kinds of things. So it's a little bit different for B2B versus B2C, but yeah, it's so powerful to do it with customers because obviously this is who this is for, right? And if we can sit and listen to them and really hear their pain and see their pain, we can build that empathy, right? So.
And when you target those customers to bring in, we had talked in sessions before where 20% of your customers probably bring you 80% of your business. So is that how you target the customers or the buyers to bring in?
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing that I would do is don't just bring your favorite customers into the room either, right? You've got to bring the folks who, where you're butting heads or things aren't going well. You've got to have the opportunity to have them in the room as well, because you want to improve that relationship. So yeah, but I would absolutely do that. I would focus more on the 80-20 rule there. And then, and like I said, don't always just bring in the good apples, bring in the folks where the relationships are a bit strained right now.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So next rule would be to really be people focused. And that sounds like a no-brainer, but this is really what it's all about, right? This, again, I can't emphasize enough that when you're doing this exercise, it's all about your customers and it's all about their experience. And so that's a great segue into the next point, which is about empathizing, right? And empathy and really listening and asking questions and really allowing yourselves to capture that emotion in the map. And we'll talk a little bit about this in just a few minutes, but when we're mapping, we capture what customers are doing, thinking, and feeling. And the reason that we capture what the customers are feeling is because this is where we start to build that empathy too. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we actually make our customers go through that and cause that pain. And why do we do that? And how do we do that? And how can I alleviate that for my customers? And I have to tell you, when we're capturing this emotion, a lot of times people roll their eyes and are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to put up there what I'm feeling, right? But you know what? I work with a client in a very manly man industry. And the day that I told them we were going to put, Post-it notes up on the wall that said, we're going to capture what your customers are feeling, they just all groaned, right? And we went through the workshop, and since that day, that's all they talk about is, we can't believe this is how we make our customers feel. They feel small here. They were frustrated. They felt like we didn't care, and to hear that, it's heartbreaking. It's gut wrenching to know that you put your customers through that. So that's really important. It's important for the maps to help to build that empathy and help us really understand our customers' feeling at that point. The next point would be to be curious. When you're in these mapping sessions, ask questions. What's next? What happened next? Why did we do that? Why did the customer do that? Those kinds of things. So don't be afraid to ask questions. This is a huge part of this process. Again, remember, this is a creative process, right? It's a get up, get out of your chairs thinking process as well. So ask questions, huge part of that. And last is to really have an open mind and let go of what you think you know about the experience. And this is why we bring customers into the room, right, too, because this is why we don't want to just map internally and think we know what our customers are experiencing, right? We want to make sure that we set all that aside, set aside all the preconceived notions of what we have, what we think is going well and what we don't, what we think is not going well, and really open our eyes to what is going well and what's not going well. So, all right. So from there, I'm going to jump into the 6 steps to go from journey maps to outcomes. And I'm going to start with the 6 steps at first. And if you're at all familiar with the design thinking process, you might say, hey, Annette, these steps look very similar to design thinking. And there's a reason for that, right? Because journey mapping is one of the tools or one of the processes used too within the whole design thinking process as well. So that's why some of this might look a little bit familiar. And again, the journey mapping, you'll see in those steps. So plan, empathize, introspect, identify, ideate, and implement. And you'll see down at the bottom, I know it's a light arrow there, but it's all about continuous improvement too, right? Once you've implemented those changes, here I am, I'm pointing at my screen like you guys can see what I'm pointing at, but once you've implemented those, changes, you're going to come back around and it's continuous improvement. You're going to start again and you're going to start thinking about again, how are we doing? How are we getting feedback from our customers? Where are we at right now? Is this still working for them? And as industry changes, as customers' needs change, as products evolve, as all of these things happen, the journey's got to evolve with it, right? And so it's never a one and done ever. Even after you go through these 6 steps, it's never a one and done. You're going to keep on improving. It's a real continuous improvement process there. So let me go through the 6 steps. All right, so the first step is all about planning. And planning is like the things that you need to do before you go into your journey mapping workshop. And so there are several things that I want you to think about here. So the first thing is when we map customer journeys, we map the customer that we're mapping for. We've created personas for this, right? We're not just mapping for the entire customer universe, because as we know, every customer is different, right? So what we need to do is we need to create customer personas, and to use buyer personas is not enough. And I'll get into that in a second. But what we need to do is create personas that are specific for CX design, that are specific for customer experience design. We're not going to use targets. We can't use, men 18 to 49. That's who we're mapping for, because Lord knows men at age 18 have way different needs than those at 49. They've, and there's such a spectrum of difference from 18 to 49 in terms of their needs. And we don't want to think about, targets, and we don't want to think about demographics. What we want to think about is personas. And personas are research-based. A great way of putting it is sort of a research-based group of common people in terms of what their needs are, what problems they're trying to solve, what their pain points are, what jobs are they trying to do, right? So that's what persona is all about, research-based, but they're different from buyer personas. The ones that we use for CX design are different from buyer personas, which is what your marketing folks are using, because we capture the pain points, the problems to solve, the jobs to be done, their needs, those kinds of things at a lot more detail to be able to get to the right customer and to be able to design an experience that's going to be personalized or customized for that group of people. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to outline clear goals and objectives and success metrics. Okay. So why are we mapping, and what are we going to do with this map when it's done? And then success metrics, right? We don't know we've gotten there until we've measured that we got there, right? And I'm sure, Lynne, you guys have talked about success metrics many times throughout each one of the 7 different phases here, but you've got to have clear goals, you've got to have clear objectives, and you got to know how to measure that you've achieved your goals and objectives with something even as simple as a journey map. And
what we've said, and with respect to that, is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and if you can't manage it, you can't grow it. So that's exactly on point with how we're teaching these 7 forces as well. So
I love it. Yeah, I love it. That's great. Next thing you want to do is you want to clearly define and stick to the scope of your map, right? So you've got to have some point A and some point B that you're mapping from. Otherwise, you could just be mapping ad nauseum. So pick a point. I called customer support. My problem on that call was resolved, or that call ended, right? So you've got to pick that. I ordered a product on Amazon. I clicked the place order button and got my confirmation email. You've got to pick a very succinct journey that you're going to be measuring, because if you go too broad on that, mapping. But if you go too broad on that, you're just you're going to map for forever, and B, you're just going to go down so many rat holes when you want to just focus on a specific experience, right? And we want to map the current state first. I've done so many workshops where my clients want to go straight to mapping the future state, and the future state is obviously the new experience, what we're going to be fixing, when we fix, that's what it's going to be. But we can't get to the future state without, like I said earlier, without knowing the current state, because some of the things that we're doing, we may be doing well, and we want to keep doing those things, and customers may appreciate those things, but we really need to understand what's broken so that we can fix that. So we need to start with mapping what the experience is today. And then we need to make sure we have the right attendees in the room. And that's a combination of, again, customers. I won't go into that again because we just talked about it's ideal to map with customers in the room, and then stakeholders. And I'll use the example of the customer service call, right? This is one of my favorite examples, because what ends up happening, and to Stephen's point earlier, this may have been before we went live, was, customer service is what happens when the experience breaks down, right? So somewhere along the line, the customer is calling customer service because there was a problem somewhere upstream, right? Marketing messaging wasn't clear. The documentation didn't have the information that I needed. The billing, the invoice was not accurate or wasn't easy to understand. Sales sold something that they sold the dream. They never do that. Those kinds of things. That's why they ended up at your call center. And so we need to have those other folks in the room so that they can hear and see what that experience is, and then weigh in, and then take ownership and accountability for their part, for their piece, if they were the root cause of having that customer call customer service. So that's why I like to have a cross-functional mix of folks in the room, especially for that type of a map, if we're journey mapping the customer service call. And then we like to prep attendees beforehand. I always have a pre-workshop meeting with all the attendees so that they know, what a journey map is, what we're going to be doing, the homework that they're going to need to complete before we get into the workshop. And really, basically what this prep meeting does is it allows people to come in and dive right in and get started right away. All right, so step number 2 is empathize, and this is all about mapping, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we map. So when we map, there are a bunch of different frameworks that people can use to map. And, you know, Lynne, you had asked me coming into this presentation to bring examples and templates and those kinds of things. And the crazy thing is there's not really one, not really one common template that everybody uses, but I do have one coming up here in a couple of slides that will kind of give you an idea of where we need to start and some of the most basic information that you need to capture in your maps. And really, the 3 things that every framework have in common are capturing what the customer is doing, what the customer is thinking, and what the customer is feeling. So the steps, the emotions, and then the thinking is all about the goals. What are the customer's goals or desired outcomes for each of those steps, or why did the customer take that step in the journey, right? So if you think about going to get coffee, right? I got in the car, I drove to the coffee shop, I parked in the parking lot. You know, for each one of those steps, there's got to be why the customer did that and what emotion did that elicit for the customer, right? So if there was no parking, I'm sure the feeling Post-it note is going to have some nasty grandma, you know, that kind of thing. There's a long line waiting to order your coffee. There's, that's a problem too. So those are the kinds of things that we capture. And like I said, I'll show you just a quick template here in just a second, as soon as we get through this slide. The other point that I want to make here is that we need to map from the customer's perspective. I think I've mentioned that already. And then we're going to capture what's happening on stage. And by that, I mean, as the customer is taking those steps in the journey, who are the people and what are the tools, the processes, the documents, the systems, those kinds of things that they're interacting or that they're using as they're interacting with your brand. So customer service. So it might be a customer service rep is the person. The tools and the systems and the documents and the processes might be, the phone system or your website or your chat bot or something like that, so you're going to capture where and how those interactions are happening, because the more we know about what the customer did and how, the better we can, analyze it and get to the root cause of the issue there as well. When we're mapping, we're not going to process map. We're going to do that a little bit later, and I'll show you an example of that too. And we're not going to problem solve. We're going to do that later as well. While we're in the workshop, we're simply going to be capturing the customer's perspective of the things that I just mentioned. And we're going to make sure that we map journeys and not life cycles, right? So here's the difference. If we life cycle map, and this is something that's really more appropriate for the marketing folks and the sales folks, is we're thinking about at a very high level, what do the customers need? It's need, awareness, consideration, selection, blah, 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 right? That's the life cycle map. The journey map is, again, it's mapping something that's happening within each one of those stages and at a very detailed level as well, right? Your point A to point B. And we're going to map at a solid level of detail, right? People always ask me, like, A, what should I capture? And B, when I tell them the answer, they go, well, why do I need to do that? So I always say, when you're mapping, map at the level of detail so that you really understand what the person was doing, right? What steps did they take? So again, going back to the coffee shop example, again, we're always talking sort of in I phrases as we're doing this map too. The I phrases are, I've put myself in the customer's shoes. So I'm going to use that for now. So I got into the car, I drove to the coffee shop, I sat in traffic, I arrived at the coffee shop, I parked the car, I walked to the door, I opened the door, I saw a line, I'm waiting, sort of that level of detail so that we can really understand the steps that they went through. And not only do we want to capture that level of detail, but we want to also make sure that we capture things that are sort of handoffs and things outside of our control. So if you think about that coffee shop example, if somebody had to park, maybe they had to park on the street and there's only street parking in front of the coffee shop. It's not really the coffee shop's fault that there's not enough parking. Well, it might be a bigger problem, but it's not something that the coffee shop can immediately control, right? And so, but we want to capture those things because as part of the experience, as part of redesigning the experience, we want to mitigate those problems, right? Those things that are outside of our control. So when I walk into the coffee shop and I'm already upset because traffic was bad and parking was bad and all of this, but I'm the coffee shop owner and I think, okay, well, I know this is happening. How can I mitigate that? How can I, when the customer walks into my door already frustrated, what can I do? Okay, well, maybe I'm going to serve up free muffins or free samples to everybody who walks in the door and while they're waiting in line, right? Or we're going to show some video as people are walking in the door, and then maybe it's a comedy show or it's something just to sort of, put people at ease after a stressful, after a stressful trip to the coffee shop. Because we want, once they're inside of our store and inside of our control, then we want to make sure they have a great experience. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that happens. The other thing that we want to do is we want to bring in data and metrics into our maps. So in terms of data, we've got a ton of structured and unstructured data. We've got survey data, we've got social media, we've got people out there posting reviews and things like that. We can bring that into the map and put it in the right place on the map where the customer has taken that step in the journey, right? And we can bring metrics in. So I don't know if you've got customer satisfaction scores or net promoter scores or other, company, customer data and metrics that would make sense along the journey, but you want to bring those into the maps as well. And all that does is to help to bring the map to life, right? And help people really understand where the pain points are, really hearing the voice of the customer as they're looking at that journey and seeing, bring in your Yelp reviews or whatever, and they can see, okay, the customer was talking about this point in the journey, and I see what usually happens right before that or right after that, right? So it just lends more understanding and bringing the journey to life. And another thing to help bring the journey to life too is to bring in what I call artifacts. And those are things like, screenshots of the website or screenshots of the page where you place the order, or copies of invoices for, maybe a call to service around an invoice, pages of the documentation or the instructions that were in with the packaging, the installation instructions or something like that. Pictures of the cash wrap at the grocery store when customers are complaining that it took, 30 minutes. I was in line for 30 minutes to pay for my groceries. Those kinds of things really help to bring the journey to life so that you can see, wow, this is real. This is real, The other thing that we like to do on journey maps is to assign owners to each of the steps and this will really come in handy in the next phase because, or maybe 2 phases down, but when we do, root cause analysis and we start creating our action plans and creating the plan for how we're going to fix these things, we need to know who's going to own, who's going to be accountable, or who is accountable for that step in the journey. So I like to put those on the map if I know it while we're, in the process. Again, if we didn't map with customers, we want to make sure we validate the maps with customers, and then we want to digitize them. So let me stop here for a second and say, I like to start mapping in a journey mapping workshop with butcher paper and Post-it notes. And I'll show you a layout here that I like to use. I hope you'll be able to see this, but so I like to use butcher paper up on the wall, different colored Post-it notes for each one of these, what we'll call swim lanes here. And people get up and I say, hey, go start putting up the steps in the journey, right? And so we'll give everybody a pad of Post-it notes and they'll start putting up the steps that the customers are taking to do, A to B, whatever they're doing. And then I'll give them another set of Post-it notes, different color, and they'll say, well, tell me what you were thinking. And here's another set of Post-it notes, different color. Tell me what you were feeling along, that journey, right? And so this is this top part here of the map, right? And then right below this, and I have another screen or another template here that I'll show you that continues the bottom portion of this in just a second. But this is also where you'll lay out, with the people and the tools and the processes and things like that they were dealing with, what we call on stage. So who is the customer interacting with? Which of your employees was the customer interacting with? So while we do this all in butcher paper and Post-it notes, when we're done doing that, we like to digitize the maps, put them in a digital format, because they are living, breathing documents and they need to be updated, and you need to bring in that data and you need to add those artifacts and all of those kinds of things. So you really want to digitize them because it just makes it a lot easier to adhere to a lot of the rules of journey mapping. All right. I know I'm trying to keep track of time here too. Last time I think we went on for over 2 hours, and I'm not going to do that this time.
Believe me, a lot of these people are willing to stay on. So this is so
The information is phenomenal. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and if they can't stay on, we got the video. So please, if you're okay to stay, we would love it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, these next 3 or 4 steps, I'll try to move through them a little bit faster, but I really wanted people to understand sort of the basics and the guidelines and the fundamental, sort of the foundation of mapping before we get into a lot of these other things too. So steps 1 and 2 were all about getting into the workshop, mapping your map, and then here we are, we're done with the map with our customers, the work that we were doing with our customers. So now we're going back to the office, and I like to, the next day or whatever, have a debrief with the team that was involved with the mapping with our customers. And we sit down, we sort of all go through, well, what did we learn? And, what are we going to do next? And sort of start thinking about, what do we think some of the issues are, and how would we solve them? We're not yet problem solving. Okay. What we're going to do next is internally, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to create what we call a service blueprint, and then we're going to do some process mapping. Now, the service blueprint is what we call the backstage processes. And the backstage processes are so we talked about on stage, which was the people and the tools and the processes and the systems that the customer interacts with the organization. The backstage are the people, tools, and processes and systems that support and facilitate what's happening on stage, right? What's facilitating that particular experience that the customer is going through. So we're going to map that. And then we're also going to do a more detailed process map that really captures the flow of everything that's happening behind the scenes. And so what ends up happening when we put all 3 of those together is we have, the journey map, which is the end-to-end experience. And then we've got the service blueprint and the process map, and there's sort of the surface to core, what's happening behind the scenes to support the experience. Now you can't do the journey map independent of these other 2, right? Because you can't just fix what's happening with the customer and not fix what's happening behind the scenes that's actually making all those things happen, right? So I hope that makes sense, but they have to go together because of that, right? Because there are things that are happening behind the scenes that if those weren't happening, you couldn't deliver what was happening for the customer, and the customer couldn't do what it is that they're doing. So very critical that those are captured as well. And so this is the next step in the process. So as you can see, I've kind of filled in the boxes down here on the lower half, where this is the on-stage people and tools and system and processes. But down here below, we've got the backstage people and tools and systems and processes that we're capturing here, as well as down here at the bottom. And I don't know if you can see my mouse moving on the document there, but down here at the bottom where we've got processes, this is where we're capturing some of the more detailed flow of what's really supporting and holding up, and a lot of sort of third-party details back there as well. It's all, like I said, all the behind the scenes kind of stuff. This is different from what we talked about, or more detail, Lynn, than what we talked about when I was here last year. And I think this is a really important sort of next step for everybody who heard, last year's, is that you've got to know how to do this behind the scenes stuff as well.
Well, yeah, and I love that it's pointing out, which you've already said, where the problems arise that cause the customer service to have to come into play.
Right. Yep.
So, it's phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so let's go on to step 4, and this is where we've got all this stuff captured, and we want to take a look at those more problematic moments. When we go through and we map, we identify something we call the moments of truth. And these are really the make or break moments where, and especially when we bring in some of that data and those metrics that help to kind of call out where things are going well and where things are going. Where did I get a 1 star out of 5 stars on a Yelp review? Those kinds of things. Those help us to identify the moments of truth as well. They help us to identify those make or break moments where if we don't get this part of the journey right, the customer moves on. They go and they don't buy from us. They go and they do business with somebody else. Versus if we execute this really well, they're going to continue doing business with us. So this is a really important thing. And so we've got to prioritize those moments of truth and then identify, the bad moments of truth that where bad things are happening. I should say the broken moments of truth, probably a better way of putting it, the broken moments of truth, research why they're broken, conduct a root cause analysis, and really then go from there to create action plans and how we're going to go about fixing these things, right? We can't design a new experience or we can't implement a new experience if we haven't fixed some of these pain points and some of these root causes, right? So we've got to get those taken care of as well. So we've got to come up with an action plan. We've got to assign owners and we've got to assign deadlines, and we need to stick to them and stay accountable for the part that's been assigned to each of the owners. So we've got to make sure that we track that accountability and make sure that work gets done. Okay, so then the next step, once we've fixed some of those things, is then to go into future state mapping, and I call this stage ideate, because we're going to ideally, we're going to get together with customers and we're going to ideate solutions to the current pain points that they're having. And we're going to also ideate and brainstorm their ideal experience, right? We're going to ask them outright, this is how your experience is today. If you could pie in the sky, unicorns and rainbows, design an experience that would be, what would that look like? And we do set the tone here for this type of workshop or session. That, by the way, just because you say it doesn't mean we can do it, but we certainly want to hear. We want to know what our customers, we're clearly not delivering on your experience the way that you thought we should. So what would your ideal experience look like? And so that's what we do in these brainstorming and these ideation sessions. And then we create a future state map based on the things that we've heard. We'll do the same thing with the backstage, the behind the scenes processes as well. We will ideate. We won't have the customers involved on the backstage stuff, but we will internally ideate and brainstorm about better ways to do that. And a lot of times what we'll also do, and I'll just introduce a term and I won't go very deep into it because this is a whole topic in and of itself, but value stream mapping, which is all around lean thinking and identifying areas of waste and identifying areas of delivering value for your customers. So that happens as part of this process as well. So. Okay, and then the sixth step in the process is implementation, and this is basically, get to work, go do the work, right? You've now designed your ideal future state or the actual future state experience. You've got to go from design, you've got to implement it now. So you've got to prototype it, test it with your customers, and fail fast. Like if it's not working, redo it, re-prototype, retest, and get it right? But you definitely want to test it with customers first, and then roll it out to everybody. Test it with a small group of customers first, and then roll it out to everybody. And then you're going to want to train your employees on the new processes and how they're, what the expectations are for them, right? How they're going to deliver that new experience. We're going to close the loop with customers. We're going to let them know, hey, we heard you. We heard that there was this pain in this particular experience. Here's what we've done, and here's what the new experience is going to be for you. And then also you're going to need to keep the maps updated, right? And I mentioned that earlier, that this is not a one and done. It's a continuous improvement process. So the journey map should always reflect the current state of the experience. So once the improvements are made, once the future state has been implemented, you want to make sure the map always has, the current state experience, the new current state experience in it. All right, so I think it did pretty good actually, trying to stay within the time frame this time and still hopefully have time for some questions too here at the end. But really, I think one of the key takeaways and one of the things that I really like to say when it comes to this and anything else that you're doing when it comes to improving the customer experience or the employee experience is really nothing changes if nothing changes. We can do all of this work. We can do all of this mapping. We can do all of this listening. We can survey our customers. We can do so many different things. But if we don't make the changes, if we don't take the time to do the work that is not just the tool, but the process itself to improve the whole experience, things are just going to stay the way that they've always been, right? And so that's what we've got to do. And this is where I always, when my clients start to kind of grumble and I hear them say that they don't have the time or the resources or whatever, the inclination to, do the work, I just remind them that nothing changes if nothing changes. So you've got to get down and dirty and get the work done. So.
No, I think
sorry. Go ahead. No, you're fine.
No. I think it's I just think it's phenomenal. I mean, there's so many wonderful things that happen when you go into this kind of detail with the journey, and identifying the processes that are broken, so that you can fix them. I mean, that's only going to make things better and entice more people and create the raving fan clients. The fact that you're getting the customers involved in your process of figuring out their process. Gives them the significance they need and lets them know that they're being heard and that their concerns are being addressed.
Absolutely. And that's part of the experience too, right? It's all about, and going back to your point about humanity is, again, I think too many of us feel like companies just design experiences, or who knows if they even design experiences, but they do all of this work in a vacuum, right? And really, it's like you can't forget who you're doing this for. So
no, that's absolutely right. And then I love that along the way, you start assigning some of these key points to people within your company so that somebody is accountable for those.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that being done, when something starts changing, say in the industry or with that particular process, or do they then step up and say, hey, it's time to do a revision or an update? Or when do you know when that update is necessary?
Well, you're probably going to hear it from your customers.
Okay.
That's going to be your first indicator, right? Because along with this, I mean, there's a whole strategy that you've got wrapped around this. Again, the journey mapping is only one tool, one process in your customer experience strategy and your approach to improving the experience. So you're going to be listening to customers in a variety of different ways. There are a lot of other sort of signals out there that will tell you it's time to revisit this. But I like to also not only with those signals, but then also with, as I mentioned earlier, like when you're acquiring businesses and you're integrating new businesses, when you've new products and you've got new customers and you've got, you can tell from listening to your customers that their needs have changed and there's emerging trends in the data and all of these other things. There's all these other signals out there but I like to, especially the first point that I made is this, so many companies are with acquisitions and trying to integrate new businesses and other businesses. That's a good time to say, okay, let's step back and take a look at the customer experience again and make sure that it encompasses the new businesses and the new products that we brought under our umbrella. So
love it. Stephen, you want to join us? Are there any questions?
I haven't gone anywhere. Hold on here.
Great job. Can you minimize the thing? I can't see you.
Oh, do you want me to stop the slides? Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
There we go. Great job. So I've got a lot up here. As you can see, what you did was you forced my hand. Nice. I do have some questions. So first off, you mentioned that this was different than like a life cycle map, and then you mentioned it was different than a client persona map. So would you suggest that the journey map is the most in-depth map that you'll create in regards to a business?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So this is the deeper dive kind of thing. And then you would suggest like you have a master journey that is going on that you update continually whenever you shift the process.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So this is an important concept to understand, people. So we built out a map from a terrain standpoint, and everybody always wants to know, well, do we deal with the nuts and bolts? Do we deal with functionality? And what this is doing is this is literally getting down in functionally what is the experience that this person goes through when they're buying it from a functional perspective. If you don't update this, you don't go in depth in this part, there's no way for you to functionally know. The less of this you do, the more in theory you are. You think about it. In theory, it doesn't sell, right? Like the functionality sells. So you want to make sure that this is the most in depth. And so you might consider at this point, this is something where we start to spider web out everything you're going to start to see when we go into the op maps in a couple of weeks, how this right here, this map, you can take and literally put KPIs over this, and then now you have something that you can go and optimize, and go and optimize it. You pull out your little sticky note, optimize it, set it back up so that you have the journey that you can go on. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it does, but your microphone or something is like bleeping out a little bit. Yeah, it's hard to. You're bleeping. I don't know. It's like warbling or something, right?
Yeah, it's totally broken up.
Yeah.
Is that better?
No.
No. I don't know what's going on. That's kind of weird.
And Lynn, you sound fine, so.
Of course, I got my earbuds. Just like you did.
Right?
As long as Lynn sounds fine, we're good. Yeah, what I sound like when you say that. Oh, hang on here.
It's
I
getting
think
a
I know
little
what it
better,
is.
maybe, but
Is that better? How's that?
slightly, but
yeah.
yeah.
Is that better? Oh, yeah, I'm breaking it out. How about now? How do I sound now?
Yeah.
Sounds cartoony now.
Yeah.
You know, Stephen, I love it when you get started and it's like you're like on this roll and you're passionate about it, and
I know we're excited. We can't hear a word. We can't hear you.
and it's like time out, and you're like, no, we're not.
So,
Well, kind of, but you know, it's definitely. You don't have another mic or something. Okay, so
You were way better earlier. What happened? What changed from the beginning?
I don't know.
It's a short between my keyboard and my chair. How about now?
Slightly, but not, you know, like before, like at the beginning. So,
How's that?
oh, you know, I heard that noise a little bit. So there's something going on with something. But let's see. Talk.
You know what? Let me mute myself. Let me see if that helps.
Talk, Stephen. I mean,
I've got questions. Hang on, I got questions.
okay. You know, I think we can make it out. So
We'll figure it out.
yeah, we'll figure it out. Go ahead and ask. Maybe he's going out and coming back in. You were talking a little bit about metrics and KPIs. In case some of these people don't know exactly where they go to find those or how to measure them, what do you recommend in that regard?
So a lot of it is going to come from your surveys or your Yelp reviews or those kinds of things, right? So it's going to be how many stars do I have on average? Or if you do a survey, it's going to be your customer satisfaction score. If you ask what a very popular metric, which is Net Promoter Score, which is based on the how likely are you to recommend my business to a friend or colleague question. So those are the kinds of things that you'll want to bring in, because again, it lends a little bit more color to the journey, and it tells us really, is the journey good or is it bad, right? Are customers happy or are they not happy with this? So, and I think that especially if you're going through, for example, that call to customer service, that if your survey is capturing things at different points in that call, so for example, the quality of the resolution or how much time it took to get a resolution or those kinds of things, and we bring that data into the map at the right point in the journey, it just brings a little bit more color to it and allows us to see where things are going well and where they're not. So.
Perfect. A couple of sessions ago, we talked about finding your industry code, even just for IRS purposes. But when you do that, you can take, what your industry is and other businesses in your industry. And we were directed to a KPI library before. So that would be another source maybe for people to find out what kind of metrics that are typically measured in that industry and then within similar businesses.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there's two different kinds of metrics, right? There's the metrics that you would bring in along the journey that tell you, about satisfaction and likely to repurchase and recommend and those kinds of things. But there's also metrics around, because one of the first things I said was to set your goals and your objectives and what are your desired outcomes and how do you the success metrics. And those are going to be things like, customer lifetime value, the retention numbers, the revenue, profitability, those kinds of things, share of wallet, so.
Exactly. So.
Did he make it back?
Not yet, but let me look to see. Couldn't understand half of what you said, but understood everything you said, Stephen. Sound broken. Excellent presentation. I'm trying to just look really quickly. The customer journey is real and affects us all. Again, I just love that. It just gives you. It's not only about the customer, which of course is the main focus, but it's also about finding those processes. And if you haven't set your systems up correctly, this is the perfect opportunity to find those spots where things need to be corrected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or enhanced. And then there's always ways. I love when you were talking about the coffee shop example. If they're standing in line, what can you do to make that a little bit more pleasant for them?
Yeah. A lot of it is too. It's about how do we mitigate, like some of these things we can't change, right? They're going to be what they are. And it sucks that they're going to be what they are and they're going to be painful. But if we can mitigate that, right? If we can do something to just add a little bit of delight to the customer's day, then yay, it's awesome.
Absolutely. It's totally unexpected for them. And they, that's how people start talking about what you're doing for them. And that's where you get the referrals. Do you also measure referrals you get from these processes?
Yes, you can do that for sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Beautiful. And then you were talking, oh, here he is. Yay.
He's back.
About applying it to your employees. But I read quickly a book about, creating the company culture. Yes. And if you don't have the opportunity to bring your customers in, you create the map and then allow your employees, like you were saying, go and walk in the steps of the customers based on the map that you've created. So
yes, much better. And nobody internally knows your customers better than the people on the front line, right? And they can bring a lot of the same feedback and a lot of the same experience to the table when it comes to mapping that. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So I had a question. So you said something, you talked about the moments of truth. And one of the things I thought of was what would happen if not only you looked at what are the moments of truth and what are the kind of the real, we got them, it's a make or break moment, but also where are some wow moments? Like when you get you get the customer's map up, you can go, okay, where do we represent we? Where does us in this brand, in this journey, where does the us come out? And where are some wow moments? Something that, call it a brand moment, call it something. But I was thinking as you were doing that, what if we very consciously pick these moments that we knew, like you talk about the customer coming in and you're in a coffee shop and the parking lot is terrible. Well, not only those moments where we know the customer's in a bad mood or we know the customer has had a bad experience, but go the other end, all the way to the other end and look for those moments where you can really like knock it out of the park and create a moment that's like a brand moment that's going to represent who you are as a brand.
Yeah.
So that you're consciously putting in there those human, the humanness, the when you talk about empathy, where can you not only mind read, because Tony talks about mind reading, where can you emotion read as well and anticipate the opportunity to create a wow moment for your client?
Yeah, it's a great point.
I was thinking of that when you were talking. I was like, well, that's a great idea. And then now we can go back and we can go, okay, so this is every 2 months now. We can pull up, like once you do this once, here's the other thing, guys. Once you do this once you get it up on the board and you can just adjust it, now, every couple months, maybe you go back and you really pick it apart and look at it from inside out, look at it from right side out, and look at it from look at it from every different angle to say, okay, is this the journey? Not only is this the journey we on, but you can go back into that ideation where you're going, okay, what would happen if we took everything we knew and we had to wipe the board clean and then we had to start fresh? Would this be the journey that we wanted our client to go on?
Right. And is this the journey that they want to go on?
So that's an even better question.
Even more,
the journey that they want to go on, right? Yeah. Did I just say the same thing you guys were just talking about?
When you came back, that sort of branded moment, maybe you said it a little bit more eloquently.
Yeah, we'll give it that, right?
I had a lot of time to think about it. I was sitting here waiting to get a turn to talk, and what can I say that would make me sound really smart? And I rolled it over and went with like 3 or 4 different reversions before I went with the wow moment. How did it? Should I have gone like on a scale from 1 to 10? Good. Okay, good.
You were 20. Yeah. Come on. You were just out of the ballpark.
Yes. So your homework assignment for this week should be pretty obvious. Go to Staples, go to Home Depot, go wherever, and get yourself some little sticky notes.
Amazon.
Amazon, right? Any place. Get yourself some sticky and say, okay, what does the journey look like? And you can spend the whole week doing it. You can do all kinds of things, but map it out. And it was like you were talking, I was like, man, imagine all the speed bumps that you could come across.
Right.
It reminds me of, they made a horror movie about a house in San Jose, the Winchester Heiress house. Have you heard of that house?
Yes.
There's a house in San Jose, guys, that you literally pay tickets for because it's that crazy. And the house, true story, was built by the lady that was the heiress of the Winchester fortune. So first off, she thought she heard voices, and I'm not going to go into we're not going to go down that road. That's next week's episode. But we're not going to discuss whether she heard them or not. But just imagine for a moment, as an individual, that you heard these voices rolling around your head. Imagine how difficult that must have been, and all the chatter. And a lot of my business owners, when I talk to them, that's the same kind of thing. They're the chatter, chatter, chatter. And that's what they're doing. They're just responding to the chatter that is and building as they go. Oh, I need this process to do this. So I'm going to need this to get this. Wait, the customer changed? And then they go over and they build here. And then they go over and they build here. And then they go over and they build here. And I go, so how is things going? And they go, I don't know. I'm busy spinning like, whoa, stop back. And then they map out the journey. And what they realize is they built this fun house. This house is real. There's steps that go to the ceiling, and there's secret passages, and there's windows you can't see out of, and rooms you can't get into. I mean, it's just insane. And that's what business owners do. This allows you to not only build consciously, but build for the reason, which is for the only reason that your business exists is for your customer. So don't you think you should understand the journey that your customer is going on?
That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy.
It really is.
We do. We build those stairs that go to the ceiling, and it's exactly.
Maybe you needed it. Maybe you needed it because your customer wanted this specific outcome 5 years ago, and so you spent all this time, energy, and money building down this way, and then all of a sudden it shifted, and now you've got a half-built process that your customer has to go up a couple steps and then jump over to get to you to buy from you. And this whole time you're thinking, well, my product sucks, I need to innovate. Well, no, there's a big chasm that half your customers are falling down when they come to you. And without having the journey up, there's no way for you to you're assuming that they want you so bad that they're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And that's just not the case.
Yeah, there's
We're
too much
watching
competition.
a lot of stuff on humanness, story branding, really understanding the client's perspective and how it feels to be them. There's a lot of research in regards to how we as humans are evolving and how the tech aspects of it are becoming less and less important, and the EQ, the emotional quotient of an individual is becoming more and more important. I can only assume from looking at the way things operate in the real world that so for one, so for many. And so it's going to be even more important that you understand what's your business EQ. Do you understand from an emotional standpoint how you make others feel around you? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't, and you're not driving that, that's your business, that's your brand. And without that, you're just selling another widget. And again, you might as well be aiming, if you're going to be just selling widgets, you might as well just aim for this 9%, because that's all you're going to get is a price customer.
Yep.
And if you have a price customer, your customer will leave you. It's the same thing as what I call a paycheck employee. A paycheck employee, here's the other thing. When now we know the map, well, guess who we get to hire? We can hire individuals whose DNA matches the journey. We've all seen them. Have you ever been to Build-A-Bear? Could you imagine hiring a Hell's Angel to work at Build-A-Bear?
That would shake things up a bit, wouldn't it?
That'd be a great commercial for journey mapping. Could you imagine? And you have to hire the DNA that matches the position. Now, I know that's a fairly dramatic example, but we use dramatic to show you the truth of it all. The truth of it is you want their nature. I went into Build-A-Bear and I recorded it, and I wonder if I can go back and find it. Like, they take their client through this journey. Have you ever been to Build-A-Bear? It is just amazing. Like, okay, now we got to blow into the bear, blow the life into the bear. Okay, and we sing a little song and we clap our hands, and my daughters are like, just like I'm going to be spending all kinds of freaking money here. I mean, I could tell from the experience that when I got to the cash register, that journey was going to cost me more than what it took to go around. Like I could have gone through the whole mall and they could have picked whatever they want, and that journey cost me.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I think here, the one that what I'm really tying to, I wonder if the more you're able to journey this out, I wonder that's where your margin comes from. If you think about it, because brand is what separates you from commodity.
Yeah.
If you don't have a brand, you're just your entry level to a commodity is all you are. And then without having a journey, you can't have a brand because you're not conscious to the emotional the emotional experience that your client's walking on.
Yeah.
Just amazing. I mean, I'm sitting there. I just
I love the connection you
this
just
was
made.
all from your talk. That's what I got from just. So I can tell you that it was just like what you did was phenomenal, like just phenomenal.
Thank you.
Of course.
Aw,
She's really, honestly, you were such a treasure for us to have on here now for the second time. And we are so grateful. So
I am so happy
you're-
to be here.
Yes. Well, we're gonna continue to pull you out and use you for the. As you keep asking us to, and you keep telling us you're coming, we're gonna keep inviting you. So
you had no idea what you were getting into.
I had no idea.
You're like, oh, whatever you guys want. Oh, really?
I know, right?
Really? Like it's happening. Like just know that going into it. So I want to thank everybody. I don't see any more questions, Lynn.
Yeah, I looked briefly.
Oh, wait here. Doesn't doing the mapping help you understand where the best place for your business to ensure a client's business is? That way you come into your customer's life at the right time where they need you and respect you.
Yeah.
So is that kind of like she's talking about the lifetime? You talked about the life cycle of a customer,
Right.
where they're coming in at and all that. That would, again, and that was another question I had. So the life cycle map is not going to be as in depth as this map either. Is that correct?
No, and it's got different purposes, right? This life cycle is really more around marketing and sales and the things that they're trying to do in terms of making sure they get the right messaging and all that so that they can get them into the funnel and close the deal, right? Versus
who would you if you had your pick of whoever would own this, who do you believe ideally should own this? So would it be sales? Would it be marketing? Would it be customer service? Like who would be the person that would own the journey map in an ideal company?
So ideally, there would be a chief customer officer, head of customer experience, right? That's where it's going to begin because we needed to fall underneath the overall CX strategy of the organization. But you can certainly have folks in each department who can create their own maps as a part of the larger strategy as well. So every department can do their own maps, absolutely. But
and then
remember,
you bring them to the table and review them.
You want to make sure
a couple months.
and you want to make sure you're connecting them because of the overlap in terms of the different cross-functional areas that are involved from here to there. You want to make sure that everybody is connected there with that. So
you would think that the more departments you would get, the more you would want one person to make sure it all fits together inside those departments. And then you would think ideally you would have that same person in charge of the life cycle map, in charge of, like I would, in my world, if it got big enough, I would just have one person in charge of all the maps. Like, hey, map guy, come here. Give me a persona map. And Michelle called it a character sketch, right? So okay, hang on. It's a big guy carrying around maps, right? That's kind of absent-minded and he's got one spectacle. Yeah, that's who I would have. If you can find that guy, hire him as your map guy. Like,
are you volunteering?
Looks like going bald like me. You can't miss him. Like he's there, guys. He's there. So thank you again. Thank you. It was really. It's always an honor to have you come speak.
Thank you.
Your name just speaks for itself. So if people want to know more about her, it's cxjourney.com. Is that correct?
It's cx-journey.com.
Go check. I mean, the amount of content that she provided. Listen, people, we had to filter. Like she was gonna stick a hose up to the thing and open it up full blast, and we had to know and go back and watch the video from last time. It was not a hose; it was just a garden hose, and it was still
it was a lot.
And so
it was a lot.
She really did give you thank you first off for really, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to
dumbing
like
it down
cut it.
for me.
It's hard to like bring it all down to what I did. But yeah, I will.
So it's hard to talk to third graders, but Stephen, I knew that when I got you on, that you started drawing with crayons, and I mean, you pulled out, look at the picture. You draw a little stick figure, and then you got your character, and you got to follow that guy. Aren't you glad?
You've awesome.
I'm crying.
So again, thank you. If you're if you're watching this if you made it to the end of that,
I know, right?
Like congratulations at the bottom. The congratulations to you, not for us, that you made it through that. Like anybody that can make it through that.
Exactly.
You deserve some kind of congratulations. So Brett, we enjoy that. We enjoy watching the hearts and the balloons. If you're watching this as a rerun, again, congratulations. We like to see because it lets us know that there's value in what we're doing. The other thing is if you have any other questions about the content or any of the material, again, put it in the comments. We do follow that. I mean, we're all going to get, all three of us will get some kind of a reminder that somebody, and if there's a question here, we'll try to answer to the best of our ability. I mean, this is not even, hear me when I tell you, this is not even scratching the surface. Like she has just given you a great blueprint. She's given you all she can give you, but we could have picked her brain for months and still not even gotten to the bottom of what's going on here. So there's a lot in here. Remember, this is 53% of the game right here, just from a loyalty. We're not talking about from getting revenue in the door. We're talking about once you get the customer, it's like, I don't know, it's like 8 times easier to sell to an existing client than, I mean, the stats are, of course, I always wonder where those stats came from, but this one's 53% based upon some pretty solid numbers. So if you need anything,
you take the staircase to the ceiling.
If you're a gladiator, the homework is simple. Go get you some Post-it notes and map out your customer's journey so that you can see exactly what your customer goes through. So this no longer, again, the worst addiction in the world is hopium. You try something and you hope it works. There's no hopium here. We're going to map it out. We're going to know, right? And then when we start to nail down the KPIs, guess what the KPIs are going to be attached to? It's going to be attached to this. And guess what this is attached to? This is attached to where you need to be, your marketing. And the marketing is attached to your innovation. Your innovation is so that when all this shifts, everything moves based upon where your customer's at, where your customer's going, so that you're constantly evolving your business to where to the customer, which is the most important person in the room. Right. So again, thank you very much, Annette, and
thank you
for coming and sharing with us. We always appreciate it when you're here.
I'm so glad you didn't
last
go.
Words?
I'm just so glad you didn't go. I'm just so glad you didn't say that it connected to the hip bone and then to the.
Well, the hip bone connects to the. Yeah, I should have. Next time, next time, write that down. Lynne. Next time.
Okay. Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, I'm gonna play that song. That one? Is that what you're talking about?
That's the one.
Going. Like it's happening. You can take that to the bank.
Oh man, this is kind of like the blooper reel at the end of the movie when my boys go, "Mom, we need to stay through the credits because they've got some really cool stuff at the end." So.
Exactly. So if you're watching till the end, put "Lord help me" so that we know that the bloopers are important. All right, guys. Thank you. You guys have a great night. Have a great week. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye.
Good night, everybody.